we're going to head back to Parliament Hill, where Murray Rankin is speaking. Justice Committee there talking about the SNC-Lavalin controversy has just broken. Let's take a listen in.
Canadians to study this. It's fundamental to our democracy, and frankly, what happened there was a travesty.
But I don't understand, what did you expect? You're inviting this person and you know full well that she's not even sure that she can talk because that's why she took counsel. So why are you surprised?
First of all, she's coming to testify, but we don't know whether she will have both hands tied behind her back or simply one. Secondly, this was a concern that there were something like 50 meetings between SNC-Lavalin and people in the Prime Minister's office. Yesterday, the Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister of Canada resigned, and we're not allowed to hear him. Doesn't that strike you as odd? It certainly struck us as odd.
So this invitation for her to come and testify before you is just a straight up, straight down, one sentence invitation. There's no parameters, there's no qualifiers.
Well, you'll have to wait and see the text of the motion. Obviously, it was an in-camera meeting, but I can tell you that the motion that was introduced by Ms. Khalid, which was to invite Madam Wilson-Raybould to testify, was passed. But what was not passed, as I say, was anything to do with what she can say and whether or not others from the Prime Minister's office, with whom SNC-Lavalin met something like 50 times, will be able to elucidate this.
If there's no specification then about attorney-client privilege and all that, could it not be that she's coming to announce that there's nothing here?
Could be. You can speculate as well as I. I have no idea what she'll say.
She's being invited.
She's being invited.
So, but not compelled. So, is there any? Does
I think
could the committee compel her to come?
I think the technical answer is members of Parliament are merely invited. They're expected to be discursive. They're expected to say what happened. But that's a matter of courtesy. Yes, indeed, we could compel non-members of Parliament to attend, but there was no effort to do that.
What do you make of the fact that Jody Wilson-Raybould showed up at the Capitol?
I can't say. I cannot say. I can only imagine how difficult it must be for her to appear tomorrow morning in the Liberal caucus of Canada in light of what's happened, in light of the biggest constitutional crisis, I would say, since this government was elected in 2015.
Can you tell us? Yeah, go on. Does it suggest to you that they've come to some sort of resolution internally that we have yet to hear about?
It appears that way because in the middle of question period today, we get a tweet from one of the Liberal members on the committee that, guess what? Madam Justice Wilson-Raybould, she's going to come. Well, she wasn't going to move that as a Liberal unless, of course, she knew that she would be coming. So I can only infer what you can from that. I don't want to speculate beyond that.
And in terms of what she might say, do you think that they wouldn't have invited her unless they knew what she was going to say was not them?
I cannot comment on that. I know she's retained legal counsel, eminent counsel, and obviously she'll take advice from that lawyer.
So when is she going to appear in front of the committee?
We have a schedule that's been set. I can't recall the exact dates, but we have set up a series of meetings where, for example, we'll initially learn what the rules are, the shot-cross principles and so forth. We'll get a handle on that, and then, of course, we'll have testimony later.
I just want to be clear. So you're disappointed because there was a motion in there to lift the solicitor-client privilege, and it was not passed? Is that?
Look, I'm struggling because, of course, it was an in-camera meeting, but what I need you to understand was that there will be nobody from the Prime Minister's office at this. Well, that's the critical point I am making. Right. I'm also reminding people that when she comes, she could quite properly say, I suppose, based on legal advice, that I can tell you nothing. Yeah. Because of solicitor-client privilege.
And you said you're disappointed about that, but I'm just wondering, what could have the committee do about that?
The committee would have been able to compel people from the Prime Minister's office to tell the other side of the story.
Can we come to the mic, please?
Mr. Boissonneau, over here, please. Mr. Boissonneau, over here, please. Yep. If you could, just so we can, just for everyone, that way we have everyone.
And this is Liberal MP Randy Boissonneau now speaking to reporters outside of the Justice Committee discussing the SNC-Lavalin affair. The committee just broke.
J'ai une déclaration à faire. I would like to read a statement and then we'll take questions. The Justice Committee met today and has agreed to invite 8 witnesses to come to the committee, including the Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould, Member of Parliament for Vancouver-Granville. We are confident their perspectives will help us and Canadians better understand the situation. Following Ms. Wilson-Raybould's participation, the committee will meet to determine next steps. Canadians expect us to treat this matter seriously and fairly and to act with integrity. That is what we are doing. Le comité permanent de la justice est réuni aujourd'hui
Committee on
et a
Justice
accepté d'inviter 8
met
témoins,
today and
dont
agreed to
l'honorable
invite
Jody
8
Wilson-Raybould,
witnesses,
député de
including the member for Vancouver Granville, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to appear. We believe that this will help all Canadians to better understand the situation. After Ms. Wilson-Raybould's participation, the committee will meet to decide on the next steps. Canadians expect us to treat this question seriously and fairly.
Qui sont les 8 témoins?
There is a list in the, we can walk you through the list of the 8. If somebody has it, we'll answer that right after. I want to ask the privilege question came up, and this is a very important matter. The Attorney General has been asked by the Prime Minister to look into this matter. We want to hear from Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould, and that is exactly what we've set in motion today.
Mais allez-vous attendre que l'avis juridique que M. Lametti prépare soit déposé avant de convoquer Mme
Is filed before hearing from her. We are going to wait to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould. Her participation is very important. We've done what we can in committee, and we know that the Prime Minister has asked the Attorney General to look into this issue, and we are waiting for her participation.
Hearing from Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
This request will go out from the clerk. We're waiting to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould once the clerk has made the official
In
request.
terms of the order of witnesses, would she be the first you would hear from?
That is a matter up for scheduling for the clerk and the chair.
Why is there no
Are there any other
language?
members of the PMO invited?
I think it's very important, as we've heard from Canadians, that we hear from Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould before we as a committee discuss next steps.
But are there any
Let's
members of
hear
PMO?
from Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould.
It
seems like there's more than one.
PMO invited?
We have a list of 3 academics. We'll provide you with the list. We've asked for the Attorney General, David Lametti, the Clerk of the Privy Council, the Deputy AG, and we've asked for Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould to come and share her perspectives on this matter. Any other questions?
Juste pour être certaine sur l'avis juridique, est-ce que vous souhaitez
To the
l'avoir
legal opinion, do you want to have that before Ms. Wilson-Raybould appears? We will do what we can. We know that the Attorney General is looking at this situation, and we will be very interested in hearing from Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
PMO being granted the opportunity to at least address those.
We just watched Liberal MP Randy Boissonnault address reporters. Reporters are standing outside, staked outside there of the Justice Committee, which just met. The news coming from the committee is that they have passed a motion introduced by Ikra Khalid, one of the Liberal MPs on the committee, to, we're actually going to cut back here because Murray Rankin, an NDP MP, is taking questions again. Let's listen
Your
in.
understanding that you will be waiting for things before Ms. Wilson-Raybould will testify?
My understanding is that we're going to first learn what the rules are, which admittedly are somewhat complicated. What is the line that shouldn't be crossed by an Attorney General when in Cabinet, the shock cross doctrine? And they will have several witnesses on that topic. And then presumably once we are better equipped to understand the rules, then we will talk about what I hope would be the witnesses, but now we seem to have only one on the substance, Madam Wilson-Raybould.
So, you said 8 witnesses, so there's
Academics, that sort of thing, and maybe a Deputy Minister of Justice, that sort of thing.
3 they agreed to.
Yeah, I don't remember the names, but I can tell you who's not on the list. I think I made that clear.
Qu'est-ce qui a changé entre la semaine dernière et cette semaine? Pourquoi la semaine dernière? Je dois vous
This
dire
week,
que
I have to say, I want to just say that
le ton dans la
I
Chambre
heard the tone in the House of Commons today and at the meeting last week, and I decided that we need someone neutral to be dealing with this study. So today I announced to the committee that for the purposes of this study, I'm going to set aside my liberal partisanship, and I will just try to explain any committee decisions, but I will not give any personal opinions on the subjects being discuss.
No,
we're still a partisan committee, of course, but we saw the partisanship on both sides, and I think that as part of this study, there are times when the chair has to make decisions between the parties, legal decisions, and I think I will be, I will benefit from more respect if I comport myself in that way.
Given the tone that I've heard in question period and given the way the meeting last week went, I feel that it's necessary that in the framework of this type of an exercise, there's somebody at the table who appears to be neutral. And so while, of course, I have my own opinions, for the purposes of this study, I will do my best to be neutral and not express my opinions on matters before the committee. I'll only report back on what the committee has actually decided. So if anybody has any questions in that light, I'm happy to.
La liste des witnesses, on l'a pas eu.
Non, la liste
The witness list is something we haven't received yet. Well,
Madame Jody
the
Wilson-Raybould,
witness list has been established. There's Mr. David
Monsieur
Lametti,
Michael
Ms.
Warnick,
Wilson-Raybould, Mr. Michael Warnick,
Monsieur Adam Dodek.
Mr. Adam Dodek.
Il va parler sur Shawcross.
He will be talking about the
Nous
Shawcross
avons,
principle.
Madame Nathalie Drouin,
Ms. Nathalie
qui est dans le
Drouin,
département de justice.
who works at the Department
Il y a
of
des
Justice.
autres, il y a des, Monsieur Craig Forsesi
Mr.
sur
Craig
Shawcross.
Forsesi
Et il y a
on
des
Shawcross,
personnes sur, rémédiation,
and
des accords de
someone
rémédiation aussi.
on remediation agreements as well.
Je manque un?
Did I miss one?
Il en manque deux, en fait. Jody
There are two
Wilson-Raybould,
missing.
le ministre, Mr. Warnick, Adam Dorek, Nathalie Drouin, Craig Forsesi.
Non, il y a à ce moment, je crois,
And I
5
think
personnes académiques.
there are 5 academics on the list.
Monsieur Lametti,
Mr.
Madame
Lametti,
Wilson-Raybould,
Ms.
Madame
Wilson-Raybould, Mr. Warnick.
Il y a 9 à ce point-ci.
No, there are actually 9 witnesses on the list at this point.
is about the PMO. How come you're not hearing from anybody? Why are
So,
you not hearing from
so again, as I mentioned before, the Liberal members of the committee will answer that. I'm doing my best at this point to take a neutral standpoint and only report back on what the committee's done. They have to respect the chair in this case, and I think the more that I join in the partisanship, the less effective I'll be as chair. I think at this point, the best I can contribute to this is by being a chair that all sides can turn to and respect, and I think that's where I'm leaning after watching what's happening.
So what changed between last week and this week that suddenly your committee is going to hear from Madame Wilson-Raybould when last week you were not?
I think last week the decision of the committee was to come here on Tuesday and look at other witnesses. And I think today the committee decided to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould, and I very much support the committee in deciding to do that.
Voulez-vous juste clarifier, c'est 8 ou c'est 9 témoins? Excusez-moi.
Are there 8 or 9 witnesses? The original list was 8, but there was an amendment made to the list, and a 9th witness was added.
Est-ce que vous voudriez avoir reçu l'avis juridique?
Would you like to have received the legal opinion of
Mais ça, c'est encore, ça, c'est
Minister
une question
Lametti
pour la
before
committee.
Ms. Wilson appears? That's a question for the committee to deal with.
Okay, so again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Liberals. I'm speaking only as the chair of the committee, but I can say that I can say that the Prime Minister's office provided no instructions to the Liberal members of the committee. And I think,
But the order of this is.
of course, that's the part of the committee. Sure.
Okay, so how is.
So we have added additional blocks of time on Wednesday of this week, Thursday of this week, and Monday of next week. And the clerk will be working with me to invite the witnesses that we have on the list to find blocks of time. The intention would be that the academic witnesses would come first, and followed by the others. And our hope is that this group of witnesses will be finished by the beginning of next week. And then the resolution adopted by the committee also provides for a meeting after the testimony of Ms. Wilson-Raybould to contemplate next steps.
Donc, au plus tard, ce serait lundi.
Si les témoins sont disponibles.
Much after next Monday, you mean?
Next week or at the end of this week?
So we are looking at their availabilities and hopeful to find their availabilities as soon as we can within the scope of the blocks of time.
But given the academics to come first, I'm just trying to be clear.
Right, the academics will either be tomorrow or Thursday morning is my hope.
So no one from the PMO?
Demander aux autres comités. Je peux pas parler. OK, ben, à ce point-ci, comme j'ai dit,
At this point, as I said, I am the chair of the committee, and I have nothing further to add on that.
Because we didn't put a block of time Friday, I'm sorry. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Monday. Wednesday, Thursday, Monday.
How long before we hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould, according to you?
According to us, it's going to be, it's going to be in the one of the dates that the chair of the committee just indicated, should she wish to come and appear before us. But certainly we hope it is after she has solicitor-client privilege waived, because in order for her to truly speak, that's the most important part. And as you know, our motions that were published prior to this meeting did seek that from the committee, and obviously that's not what was voted on today.
If the issue of attorney-client privilege doesn't seem to be of concern, at least in the resolution that's been passed, does that lead you to believe that she is going to come to your committee and say that things are being solved?
I don't know what she's going to say. I'm glad she's coming to the committee, number one, but I'm also very disappointed that we're not going to be hearing from anybody within the Prime Minister's office whatsoever, especially given that Mr. Butts yesterday gave a blanket denial. Surely he must be tested on his denial that he gave so freely yesterday. Why wouldn't they want him to come to the Justice Committee to speak about it, especially given that we're going to be doing this over such a short time?
Can you just clarify whether that she was at a cabinet meeting today, and does it lead you to believe that perhaps they've already resolved this internally and that she's going to come and say nothing happened?
Well, what I find very interesting is some comments that ostensibly the second most important person in cabinet, Ralph Goodale, said reportedly an hour ago, when he said that this Justice Committee is nothing but a sideshow, and that this is all a smokescreen. So what kind of merit is that cabinet putting in the working of this Justice Committee when Mr. Goodale decides he's going to dismiss it out of hand, even before he knows what we've decided we're going to investigate? So that's my answer to your question. Do I think something's happened in that cabinet? Once again, secret cabinet meeting, secret discussions. We don't know what's going to come out of it. And what do they say in response? Cabinet confidence.
About solicitor-client privilege, so you kind of mentioned that it was discussed in there, but it was refused to request that it be lifted. Can you just...
So in fairness, and then I'll let my colleague, Mr. Paulus, talk to it as well en français. So we put a motion on notice requesting that solicitor-client privilege be waived, that we ask it to be waived from the Prime Minister prior to Madame Wilson-Raybould coming in to discuss, because we know we want to have more of a discussion than I can't speak to that, I can't speak to that, I'm bound by solicitor-client privilege. As you can see, or as you should know from the list of motions that have been passed, that motion was not passed. I can't go any further into discussions, but I'll let Pierre Paulus do it
but just so you finish, so you're saying that because this did not pass, there's a great risk that she will say nothing.
You'll have to ask the Liberal members of the committee as to what their plans are in terms of asking Mr. Lametti to hurry up his deliberations in terms of solicitor-client advice. I would assume, look, there's a lot of lawyers on every show giving instantaneous advice. I'm sure Mr. Lametti, who has, I don't know, thousands of justice lawyers at his fingertips, could come up with a decision on how to advise the Prime Minister on solicitor-client privilege. We have 3 days coming up. Wednesday, Thursday, next Monday. I fully expect that in order to have any kind of committee meeting that's actually going to be meaningful to get to the bottom of it, that solicitor-client privilege will have to be waived, and as well, that Gerald Butts has to be on that witness list. So I'll let Pierre Paulus speak en français.
Merci, Lisa. Donc, encore une fois,
Thank you, Lisa. So once again, the comedy is continuing. What a bad comedy, as a matter of fact. It's a cover-up. The cover-up operation is continuing, and we as parliamentarians were unhappy about the way things have been working. There was a motion that we brought forward that was rejected. So it was an in-camera meeting, so we can't talk about what was said, but we know that Ms. Wilson-Raybould will be appearing. So as long as she maintains the solicitor-client privilege and says that cannot be waived, she won't be able to say anything. And so, as I say, the cover-up is continuing. The Liberals have no intention of allowing the truth to come out, and that's very, very serious what happened. And now Mr. Butts has left his position. They're trying to bring back Ms. Wilson-Raybould. Everyone sees what kind of game they're playing now. So they obviously don't want to take the necessary steps to have the truth come out. Well, What will happen if that solicitor-client privilege is not waived? Well, absolutely nothing. So, it'll be like when witnesses come before the committee and say, well, I'm sorry, that's secret or confidential information. So she'll come before the committee and say, unfortunately, I cannot answer that question. Well, the point is that it's the new minister that has to waive that solicitor-client privilege. So that may take quite a long time. Now we're going to have Ms. Wilson come and appear before the committee while Mr. Lametti is still deciding on his decision. We'll work as much as we want. We want to get Ms. Wilson before the committee, but also we want her to be able to speak. There will be in-camera meetings and public meetings both.
Yes. Last one in English?
Last one in English.
Well, I mean, I guess we keep coming back to the question, is attorney-client privilege even important if she has made a deal, if everything's all fine and dandy, and this whole thing is going to be deflated?
The allegation has been made that the Prime Minister's office politically interfered with the decisions of the Crown prosecutor with respect to a criminal matter. That's not going anywhere. And it doesn't matter whether or not Mr. Butts is on this witness list. At some point in time, he's going to have to speak. We would prefer it be through the Justice Committee, but as you know, the Senate has already started their own process with respect to bringing forward witnesses. Solicitor-client privilege is incredibly important, but it shouldn't be something that's preventing us from getting to the bottom of the issue.
But what about the supreme weakness of this whole story is that nobody's actually said it. No human voice has actually made this allegation. And
the supreme point of proof is the fact we've had 2 resignations, one of a cabinet minister and one of the principal secretary. So are you telling me you don't think something's going on that we need to get into?
If she has cut a deal.
I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to ask the cabinet, but the cabinet's going to tell you what? Cabinet confidence.
Do you have any confidence you're going to get answers out of this study?
We will ask very good questions, and we expect the witnesses to answer truthfully because they will be under oath and give us the best information. That's why it is so crucial. Number 1, solicitor-client privilege be waived, and number 2, that Gerald Butts and Matthew Bouchard are on that list in order to get to the bottom of this issue. Thanks, everybody.
I am continuing to discuss and talk with my counsel about what I can and cannot say. That too would apply at the Justice Committee if I were to appear. But of course I respect the Justice Committee and would be, I will appear. But as I said, I'm still in discussions with my counsel about the various privileges and confidences that I have.
That was part of a conversation between my colleague at CBC, Chris Rands, and former Cabinet Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. Earlier today, she spoke to her former Cabinet colleagues as well. Justin Trudeau says she requested to do so, but what was said remains private. Now, Wilson-Raybould has been invited to appear before the Justice Committee over the SNC-Lavalin controversy after the Liberals previously wouldn't allow her testimony. Wilson-Raybould says she will testify. Why did the Liberals change their mind, and is her appearance enough to get all the answers the opposition is looking for? Joining me from the foyer of the House of Commons, Randy Boissonnault is the Alberta Liberal MP who introduced the government's motion at Justice Committee. Lisa Raitt is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party and Justice Critic. Anne-Marie Rankin is the NDP's Justice Critic. Hi to all 3 of you. Thank you so much for being with me. Really appreciate it. Mr. Boissonnault, I'm going to start with you. Why do you want to hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould today when last week you voted down a motion asking for exactly that?
Well, I think it's clear that Ms. Wilson-Raybould has served Canadians with distinction. She continues to be the Member of Parliament for Vancouver-Granville. She's an Indigenous leader. She is tops in her legal field. And I and our colleagues like working with her, and we need to hear from her directly in her own words about this matter. As to why that decision was made today, we were very clear last week, and it's a mischaracterization to say we were never going to invite Ms. Wilson-Raybould. We said very clearly that we would do what we've always done at the Justice Committee, which is have a conversation among us, take the political heat and drama out of the issue and have that conversation, a robust conversation, which we did today. And we want to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould at the committee.
But to be fair, last week you would not commit to that. all your Liberal colleagues on the committee went on to great lengths to say why you should not be committing at that point to hearing from Jody Wilson-Raybould. And today you ardently defended having her hear from her first before anybody else in the PMO.
So today we invited 9 witnesses to come to the Justice Committee, and one of those witnesses is Miss Jody Wilson-Raybould. It's important for us to hear her in her own words, and
that's exactly what the opposition said last week.
We said very clearly that we would, it's not fair to talk about witnesses in the public, in the glaring of all of the media attention, and so we.
But you talked about other witnesses like Michael Wernick.
Well, because it's much more straightforward to have federal public servants come to committee, which they do when they are called. And Mr. Lametti had already indicated publicly that he would come. So it was fair. We had a conversation today. And I think my colleagues will tell you that some of the witnesses that we have on the list that we came out of Justice Committee were suggested by my colleagues. So we had a robust conversation. We have 9 people that we've called to come to the Justice Committee.
Okay, Ms. Raitt, does that explanation satisfy you? And does Mr. Boissonnault have a point that they didn't say they would never invite Jody Wilson-Raybould last week, and now behind closed doors in a less politically hyped up environment, they have agreed to have her come?
Well, the takeaway on this and what the result is at the end of the day of the 9 witnesses is 2 things. Number one, that she is still bound by solicitor-client privilege, and we did put a notice of motion prior to this meeting asking that the committee ask the Prime Minister to waive it, and clearly that didn't come out as one of the positive decisions out of the committee. But the second piece is we do need to hear from the antagonist in this, the allegations, and that's Mr. Gerald Butts. And the reason being is that he gave a very lengthy, I would submit, statement yesterday in which he alleged that he has nothing to do with it, that these are all basically trumped-up charges, and we deserve, as parliamentarians, to be able to test him on his testimony. And as you can tell from the list, he's not on it right now.
And why not? What's your understanding of why?
That I can't get into because it was an in-camera meeting. However, what I can say is clearly it is the point of view of the Conservatives that without having his testimony and the testimony of Matthew Bouchard, people who had intimate dealings with SNC-Lavalin and allegedly have had conversations with Jody Wilson-Raybould, possibly pressuring her into changing the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutions. That's an important witness to have before us. He seems to be available, and there must be something to it because he resigned. So clearly, having him as a witness would, round out what's happening in terms of us trying to get to the bottom of this issue.
Mr. Rankin, when Liberals on the committee were asked after the committee whether or not they will be hearing from Mr. Butts, they were insistent that they didn't say no to it, but they wanted to hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould first. Do you have faith that you will end up hearing from Gerald Butts?
No, I do not.
Why not?
What happened, I think, is shocking. Canadians, step back from this. We have 2 resignations, one by the Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister of Canada yesterday, and we had one from the former Attorney General. And people have a right to know, given that there were 50 meetings in 2 years with SNC-Lavalin lobbyists in the Prime Minister's office, 12, I think, or so with Mr. Bouchard, who works for Jerry Butts. People are saying, was there a line that was crossed? People, our independent administration of justice, the prosecution of offenses has to be squeaky clean, no partisan involvement whatsoever. People have a right to know what happened. And to not have the Prime Minister's office people there, I think makes this a joke. Oh yeah, maybe we will later, etc. But why wouldn't they want to the Liberals put their best foot forward so Canadians can think that this committee is going to actually do a job for them?
But does it depend on what you hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould? For example, if she says nobody in the Prime Minister's office did pressure me, I'm just playing devil's advocate. If she does say that, do you then still need to hear from Gerald Butts?
I think the record that the Lobbyist Registry has created of 50 meetings on issues not of engineering, this is an engineering company, but on administration of justice, law enforcement things, give reasonable Canadians a bit of a sense that there might have been an improper crossing of that line. Administration of justice was politically affected. That's hugely important in a democracy. Only the Attorney General can deal with these things, and people wonder in light of that record whether there was something going on here. And by the way, he resigned yesterday. Why?
And he admitted to a meeting with Jody Wilson-Raybould.
He met with her on December 5th on this issue. We know that. At the Chateau Laurier. So we know at least that. And they don't even want to have him come forward. If I were the Liberals, I'd be embarrassed.
Mr. Boissonnault, should the committee hear from Mr. Butts?
It makes most sense, and it's entirely appropriate for us to hear from Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould before we determine next steps. And let's talk about
Why, though?
lobbyists and
Why?
meetings with Prime Minister often. Let me say first, it's completely normal course of business for people in the PMO to have meetings with proponents. If there were an environmental group in Mr. Rankin's world or a construction company in Ms. Rait's Milton riding that wanted to make sure that the centre understood the ramifications of issues, it's completely legitimate and normal course for companies, lobbyists to make their case. That is exactly
But you understand the questions that are being raised about the
I do.
timeline, right?
Like, what
they
are we
made their
talking
case, and then the DPA portion of the budget implementation was tacked on to the budget implementation bill.
And we looked at it at Justice Committee. We made that very clear. And the other point that's important to make about your earlier question is it's really important for us to hear from Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould before we determine next steps, because let's talk about what at the core of this is unfounded allegations from one source in a Globe and Mail article. There is no one side or another side. There is an unfounded allegation, and the only place that we can go to understand this issue more fully is with Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould.
So because Mr. Boissonnault, it's fake news, you don't need to hear from the principal secretary to the Prime Minister who resigned.
So let's not put words in my mouth. I never said fake news. I said an unsubstantiated allegation. Nobody came forward. This is, look, the Globe and Mail is a credible source. I'm saying nobody's come forward and said who was the source for Mr. Fife. What's really important is that we ask Ms. Wilson-Raybould what happened, and that's why the committee today made it very clear that we would like to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Okay, both Ms. Raitt and Mr. Rankin wanted to respond.
Go ahead.
Well, he resigned, as Murray was going to say. We're on the same page here, Bashi. I mean, look, Jerry Butts took it upon himself to resign yesterday. And on his way out the door, he made very clear that there was nothing that he did was incorrect, including addressing the allegation. So to suddenly say that these are unfounded allegations and therefore they're meaningless, I don't think is an actual very good position for the Liberals to be going with, because it clearly is important, and we want to hear from him, and we want to hear from him in the committee where we can put questions to him. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. We have to wait and see as to what Ms. Wilson-Raybould says. But we're going to get to the bottom of this. We've said this from the beginning.
That's what Canadians expect of us. 50 meetings in 2 years, not on engineering, but on law enforcement. Hello, that's something strange. And then the principal secretary resigns.
Strange, to be honest?
I think it is not normal to talk about law enforcement with an engineering company 50 times in 2 years. To me, that's a bit odd.
Which has been charged.
That's right. And the thing that Canadians looking at this saying, you know, what's going on, improper interference with the prosecutorial function is what they do in China and in banana republics. I am not here to say that that happened. I do not know that that happened. I sure as heck hope it didn't happen. But we, on behalf of Canadians, need to know what happened. And what if she comes, Jody Wilson-Raybould, appears before the committee and simply says, like an American drama, I can't answer on the advice of counsel 15 times? Is that good enough?
Mr. Boissonnault, does she not have to, does privilege not have to be waived for her to appear in order for that appearance to be useful to the committee and to Canadians?
Let's not let the opposition denigrate the character or skill of retired Supreme Court Justice Thomas Cromwell. He's one of the finest legal minds in this committee,
As if we did.
in this country, and he's advising Ms. Wilson-Raybould, and we did what we could do at committee, which is to ask her to come. Let's be clear: there was a motion to waive privilege. The Prime Minister has asked the Attorney General to look at this matter, and the Attorney General said today repeatedly that he is analyzing the issue and studying this issue, and we look forward to hearing from her.
I'm asking you if you think that appearance will be useful if that privilege isn't waived.
Of course the appearance will be useful.
She can't answer any questions.
I think that what will happen is that we will have Ms. Wilson-Raybould there with some of the wisest legal counsel in the country, and we can't prejudge what she will say. We don't even know if privilege will still be in place by then. So let us see how this unfolds.
She'll lawyer up.
Okay, I've got to go, but thank you very much to all three of you for your time. Thanks to Randy Boissonnault, Lisa Raitt, and Murray Rankin.
Thank you,
Thanks, Vashi.